The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Of Welcome to Freedom Friday, Joel Gilbert, my good friend. It's good to have you today.
Great to be back. Thanks, Carl.
Yeah, man. Listen, for those of you that may not know who Joel Gilbert is, certainly you've heard his name now. It's a household name. Joel Gilbert is a good friend of mine and Freedom Friday. Joel Gilbert has been on our program before, and I also had the great pleasure and honor of being with him at CPAC. And Mike Zullo and I had breakfast with him a couple times. It was great to see you there, Joel. I enjoyed that.
Great. It was fun, and let's see where we're at now.
Yeah, absolutely. Enjoyed our fellowship, and I don't know if you heard the very, very latest P.P. Simmons radio broadcast with Mike Zullo and I, but I know that you and Mike stay in touch quite a bit, and you know a lot of what's going on. But Mike revealed some pretty exciting information, things getting ready to happen in the next week or two there, and folks are getting pretty pumped that this thing may be headed towards some kind of fruition. So we hope so. But thank you for your part in all of this along the way, Joel.
Well, I've done a lot of research, as you know. My film, Dreams from My Real Father, is a complete alternate biography of Obama's life compared to his book, Dreams from My Father. And I show that all the evidence that his real biological father, who became his ideological mentor by his own admission, was a man named Frank Marshall Davis, who was a Soviet agent and Communist Party propagandist in Hawaii. And if you want to understand Obama's policies in office, I tell people the question is not where's the birth certificate, the question is who's the real father.
Right.
Once you figure that out, then you can figure out the birth certificate fraud that Obama perpetrated.
Yeah, the question is who's your daddy? And who's your daddy? Yeah, and as Joel just said, folks, he is Highway 61 Entertainment, and he is the producer, director, and writer of Dreams from My Real Father, blockbuster film that made its way all around the nation. In fact, we're going to talk about how in just a few moments through all the traditional methods, but then another really, really cool way. But he's also the producer of the two films Atomic Jihad and Farewell Israel, Bush, Iran, and the Revolt of Islam. Just a tremendous, tremendous film producer, and proud to be associated with him and proud to be his friend. Well, Joel, listen, I have you on the show today for to talk about your film producing, of course, and particularly Dreams from My Real Father, but also I have you on the show today because apparently you have made it to Obama's enemies list. I can't imagine why. Say it ain't so. I mean, this IRS scandal is pretty near and dear to your heart, huh?
Well, it was no surprise to me when it became public. I had two experiences where the IRS, I believe, targeted me. The first one was last year when my film first came out. I got a bill for 5 figures in the mail from the IRS, and they simply denied all of my 2009 business expenses, which seemed like a joke. It's absurd. Is it a clerical error? How's that possible? I'm a 15 years documentary film producer. I have well-documented, legitimate expenses like any business, but they said you can't take any expense deductions. You owe us all this money. So my accountant went down to meet them and resubmit the exact same expenses, and they had a printout. On the desk of the IRS auditor was a printout of the website of Dreams from My Real Father. Mm-hmm. And here we are almost a year later, and it's continuing. The matter is still not resolved. My accountant meets with them every few months, and they continue to send these bills. So it's still ongoing. The second thing that happened was back in October, I had a program where I was, for promotional purposes, was sending out hundreds of thousands and then a few million free DVDs to certain states to go around the media blackout on the film. And this caused a lot of consternation amongst the left. I started getting a lot of articles and calls. MSNBC attacked me several times, New York Times, BarackObama.com attacked the film, Media Matters, you name it. They were going nuts when they saw that I was going around them. And lo and behold, this man named Seth Rosenfeld called me out of the blue, never heard of him, claimed to be a former reporter for the San Francisco Examiner, and I later found out he also was associated with a George Soros-backed investigative reporting some kind of thing in San Francisco. And he just started spouting off all the direct wire transfers into our corporate bank account from different investors and buyers, and asking what they were for and if they knew each other. I was just shocked. How would he have this private company information? Hung up on him. Then over the next 24, 48 hours, I get a call from every single person that put a check or wired money to that account that this character, Seth Rosenfeld, had called them, pretending, in some cases pretending to be an old friend, pretending to be working for the Romney campaign, and then admitting he was a reporter and asking what certain exact check amounts were for, what wire transfers were for, what their political opinions were, if they supported Romney, and so on. So it was an intimidation campaign. And we're looking seriously now that we see and we have the perspective that the information probably came from IRS or government sources. We're now investigating this very seriously now that I realize I'm not alone and it wasn't an individual situation.
Right. Now, did you ever find out who this so-called Seth Rosenfeld was?
Yeah, we looked him up, and he was a former reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle. He just came out with a book called Subversives, Ronald Reagan's War Against the Left, something like that.
Uh-huh.
And he worked for this George Soros-funded so-called investigative journalism outfit out of San Francisco. So he's a leftist journalist. He's very well known to the FBI. He's been in litigation with them for like 20 years. So he's definitely, we've heard other stories. You've heard of the Family Marriage Organization, for example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Their private documents were given to their political enemies in some homosexual lobby in which the IRS revealed their donors to a George Soros-backed organization. And then those people used that information to intimidate the investors so they would not invest with the company because they had an expectation for it to be private.
Right. Right. Well, let me ask you, Joel, I mean, I know you're pursuing all of this, but just out of curiosity, and I know our listeners probably would want to know, do you have any options as far as filing any type of criminal charges against this guy for all of the pretending he did and the intimidation and the information that he should not have, or civil charges? I mean, what, you don't have to give away the farm, but what are you doing? What are you pursuing?
Well, our lawyers have been discussing it this past week. We believe that crimes were committed.
Yeah.
We believe that multiple crimes were committed as well as fraud, and we are going to pursue it very seriously. That's the most I can say right now.
Yeah, well, I understand. Well, let me ask you, so I guess one of the things that you're going to want to know, and your lawyers and your investigators are working on, is where did he get this information? Was it someone at the IRS, or did it come from the White House, or do you have any clues, any leads yet, or anything you can say about that?
Well, now that we have a model, we see that the voter organization out of Texas, the Family Marriage Council, their organization's information was revealed to George Soros-backed hit groups, mm-hmm. who then use that information. So we are pursuing the leads that we see now that have occurred in other situations. But what I try to emphasize is it's not really about me or my company. This is about, do we want political speech or opinions, as a filmmaker might do an investigative report and put out a documentary? Should this be protected speech? Do we want to have the First Amendment? I've found that the only amendment that Obama seems to like is the Fifth Amendment, where his cronies can simply plead the Fifth and not have to testify. Right. So I just decided to keep on going. I'm not going to be intimidated. I'm continuing my film productions and investigations. Continuing on my website, I have new information all the time, the obamasrealfather.com, where people can see the trailer and all the latest breaking information. Okay.
Well, folks, my guest this afternoon is Joel Gilbert. He is an American film director, writer, and producer. He's a good friend of mine. He's been on Freedom Friday before, and Joel and I were at CPAC together and had breakfast together several mornings. He is the producer of the 2012 blockbuster film Dreams from My Real Father, chronicling Barack Obama's life journey in socialism and chronicling also startling evidence that Obama's real father may, in fact, really be Frank Marshall Davis, Communist Party USA propagandist who indoctrinated Obama into Marxist ideology. So tell the folks very quick, we're going to have to take a quick time out, then we're going to come back with more, Joel. But before we run out of any kind of time here, Joel, let's get right to this. I want to ask you, so why do you think that you, and now we know because of the IRS scandal that so many others have been targeted by this, apparently by this administration, or by the IRS under this administration? Do you really think it's just some low-level clerks making mistakes or taking out personal vendettas, or do you think it's something else? What's behind all this, Joel, in your estimation?
Well, first of all, the abuse is system-wide, and to the idea that these bureaucrats at the IRS who are trained not to have opinions and not do anything unless it's by specific direction, the idea that they would embark on this campaign against one political outlook is absurd. I have no doubt that it comes from the very top, from the White House, and that's because if you look at my film, Dreams from My Real Father, Obama followed the footsteps from his real father, Frank Marshall Davis, who joined the Communist Party in Chicago in the 30s. He went back to Chicago and joined up with all of these groups that in the little-known world of American Marxism, Obama went to Occidental College, he said, to study with Marxist professors.
Right.
His entire life history is in this shadowy world. So this is the game plan of these Chicago Marxists, kind of like they have one party in Chicago, and they have segregated neighborhoods, they have high taxes. Chicago's going to be like Detroit in the coming years because of this one-party system. This rat's nest of Marxists have dropped themselves into Washington and are imposing this system. We've seen it before. You don't have to look very far back in history to see that once they achieve power, they use the tools of the state to suppress free speech, to suppress any opposition, to maintain a permanent hold on power. So it's all part of the entire ideology, putting 50 million people on food stamps. If they control your food, you're probably going to get a 90% of that group of votes. If they give you health care, they control your health. They allow the unlimited immigration. Everything they do is about achieving a permanent hold on power and wiping out any opposition. Once they do that, they use economic policies to eliminate the middle class and have one big lower class of poor society that they can reign over and then use the assets of the state for themselves. This entire game plan we've seen play out in history, and it leads to biological and economic destruction of every society that's adopted this model. So this is something that we know what they're going to do, we know what they're doing, and we know why they're doing it. So all this talk about, well, I didn't know and maybe it was somebody else, is total nonsense, and I'm hoping the mainstream media will wake up before it's too late.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping so, too, now that they're involved, now that they're victims, you know. I mean, now that they've tasted a little bit of what you've tasted of, and they've only tasted a little bit of it, but now that they have, perhaps they will wake up and get involved in this. And, you know, Joel, you and I were talking off the air, and in my opinion, this really does go to the issue of that forged, fraudulent identification document, the only piece of identification that Obama has ever officially released to identify who he is. Because if it turns out that this guy does not even have American citizenship, and that is a possibility, if it turns out, I mean, this is wickedness as high that has ever been perpetrated upon this nation. It may be the story of history, much less the century.
Well, his first assault, Obama's first assault and disrespect of the Constitution was the fact that he refused to release his birth document. The fact that when he finally released it, it's very obviously a bad forgery,
right,
was a sign of things to come, that he had no respect for the rule of law in the Constitution, and he's shown that every step of the way. It's all behind this nonsense about fairness, and I want to help middle-class families, all this problem-solving and fair play. But behind this terminology is the same old gang from the Weather Underground, from the May 19 Communist Organization, from the CPUSA, where they're trying to achieve power and then use that power to wipe out any opposition. It's the same guys with the same message, except they're masking it with these populist terms about middle-class families.
Right.
It was Obama himself, by the way, that started the crisis of the subprime mortgage.
That's right.
Debacle. People don't know that. He lied about it during the campaign 2008. When he was a lawyer in Chicago, he represented Acorn, and he sued Citibank to force them to lower their lending standards to lend to minorities who were not qualified based on skin color. Acorn then took that model that Obama helped create to the White House, and they convinced Bill Clinton to accept it, and he enforced that system across the board, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. 12 years later, it crashed the economy. This is by design. These socialists, these Marxists, they try to collapse capitalism. That's their ideology. Let's collapse capitalism so from the chaos we can rebuild a socialist society where we can take power.
Right, and give away free cell phones, and everybody loves us.
Well, the cell phones, it's all the same game plan. We've seen it, and it always goes down a very, very dark road.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.